Bill Maher was halfway into his second glass of Pinot Noir when his phone buzzed with a number he didn't recognize. DC area code. He almost let it ring out. Another political operative? A prank? But something told him to pick up. Bill, it's Bob, Kid Rock. That voice, gritty, nasal, unmistakable. Maher sat upright, caught off guard. What do you want, Bob? Dinner. At the White House. Trump wants you there. Bill blinked, letting the words sink in. He laughed, thinking it had to be a joke. But Kid Rock was serious. Dana White's coming too, he added casually, as if inviting him to a barbecue. Not the most politically tense dinner imaginable. You're saying Trump wants me at a private dinner? Yeah. Told him it'd be good for the room. Different views, break the tension, whatever. Just come, man. You'd be surprised what happens when people sit down and break bread. Everything about this felt wrong. The optics, the backlash, the headlines that would write themselves. A liberal pundit dining with Donald Trump? It was madness. And yet, something in Bill stirred. That same stubborn curiosity that had made him a professional contrarian for decades. What if something real came out of it? What if, for once, the shouting stopped and people actually talked? He didn't say yes. Not yet. He asked for the date, said he'd think about it, and hung up. Then he sat alone in his LA home, staring into the dark, wrestling with a choice most people would never have to make. Walk away from everything he stood for, or step into the lion's den and risk finding common ground with the last person he ever expected. And that's how the night began. The call ended, but the echo of it lingered in Bill Maher's quiet LA home like a political ghost. He poured the rest of his wine into the sink and sat at the edge of his couch, elbows on knees, staring at nothing in particular. Dinner at the White House. With Trump, and Kid Rock, and Dana White. It sounded like the setup to a joke, one that his audience would never laugh at. He wasn't afraid of Trump. He'd sparred with sharper minds and faced fiercer backlash. What gnawed at him wasn't fear, it was the weight of perception. What would people think? What would his people think? He could already see the headlines. Maher dines with dictator. Bill betrays the left. Late-night hosts would mock him. Twitter would erupt. He'd be labeled a sellout before the dessert hit the table. But what if they were all wrong? What if the story wasn't about betrayal, but bravery? Not about compromise, but conversation? Maher walked to his bookshelf, ran a finger over the spines. Hitchens, Carlin, Baldwin, all men who believed in the uncomfortable power of truth. They never shied away from hard rooms or harder conversations. Wasn't that what he claimed to stand for? His eyes drifted to the window. The city lights outside blinked like judgmental eyes. He thought of his audience, not the loud ones, but the silent majority, the ones tired of the tribal shouting match that passed for discourse. Maybe they didn't want another monologue. Maybe they were starving for a different kind of moment. He picked up his phone, stared at it, thumb hovering over the call history. He didn't know what the night would hold, whether it would end in disaster, disappointment, or something stranger, understanding. He called Kid Rock back. I'll be there. 3 days later, he stepped off a flight at BWI, slid into a black SUV, and let it carry him toward Pennsylvania Avenue. He didn't know it yet, but he wasn't just heading to a dinner. He was heading into the heart of America's divide, with nothing but wit, wariness, and a wild idea that maybe, just maybe, people on opposite sides of a war could sit down, break bread, and remember they were human. The SUV slowed to a crawl as the gates of the White House loomed ahead, white and cold under the fading dusk. Bill Maher watched the iron bars slide, open like the entrance to another world, one he'd mocked for years but never stepped inside like this. The driver didn't speak. Bill appreciated that. The silence left space for the weight of what he was about to do. As they pulled through the gates, a gust of wind slipped through the cracked window. It carried a strange chill, not just from the air, but from the enormity of history. This was where deals were made, wars declared, futures altered. And tonight, jokes and jabs would share space with steak and red wine. A staffer greeted him outside the East Wing, clipboard in hand, smile professionally polite. Mr. Maher, we've been expecting you. Of course they had. He followed her through corridors lined with oil paintings and polished floors, so clean they almost shimmered. The quiet was unnerving, the kind that absorbs footsteps and thoughts. Every corner they turned seemed to whisper stories. Then they reached the dining room. A soft, amber light bathed the space in a kind of surreal calm. The long mahogany table gleamed under the chandelier, already set with silver and crystal. And there they were. Donald Trump sat at the head of the table, half grin already locked in place, like he'd been practicing it. Kid Rock was lounging to his left, halfway through a drink, one boot propped lazily under the table. Across from him, Dana White leaned back, arms crossed, nodding at something Trump had just said. The room fell quiet the moment Bill stepped in. Trump stood. "Well, look who finally showed up," he said, that unmistakable voice cutting through the stillness. "Thought you were too scared to come." Bill didn't flinch. "I'm not afraid of awkward dinners," he said, shaking Trump's hand. "Just bad food." Kid Rock chuckled. Dana gave a nod of approval. Everyone took their seats. The air felt strange, tense, expectant, like the moment before a debate or a storm. For the first few minutes, the talk was light. Trump cracked a joke about real-time ratings. Kid Rock made a gluten-free dig at liberals. Dana scrolled his phone openly, like he was already bored. But something in the room was shifting. The first course arrived, seared scallops with a delicate citrus glaze, and with it came the first real moment. Trump leaned forward, fingers steepled, eyes locked on Bill. The smile was gone. "So tell me, Bill, you really think this country's better off now than 4 years ago?" A fork froze midair. Bill glanced at the plate, then back at Trump. His expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes sparked. He set his fork down slowly. "That," Bill said, "depends on who you ask." Kid Rock raised his glass. "Here we go." And just like that, the dinner stopped being small talk and started becoming something very real. The scallops were surprisingly good, but nobody was really eating. Plates cooled while the real heat simmered just above the silverware. Trump cut into his fillet, knife moving like a general's pointer. "Everyone here agrees the border's a disaster, right?" he said, eyes drifting to Bill, daring him to disagree. Bill took a slow bite, buying time. He wasn't afraid to answer. He just knew the tempo Trump liked. Quick, loud, punchy. But Bill Maher was a comic, a veteran of uncomfortable rooms. He knew that silence was a weapon, too. "I think it's complicated," he said finally, dabbing his mouth with a linen napkin. "You want real solutions, not slogans? You have to be honest about why people are coming in the first place. It's not just about walls. It's about desperation." Trump grunted. "You want open borders? Just say it." "I want rational policy," Bill said evenly. "Not a circus." That landed hard. Even Kid Rock sat back a little. Dana raised his eyebrows, suddenly interested. Kid Rock broke the tension with a smirk. "Hey, we're eating here. Nobody's throwing chairs yet." Dana cracked a rare smile. "Don't tempt me." Trump chuckled, twirling his fork. "Look, I didn't bring you here to fight. I actually like you, Bill. You talk trash, but at least you're not some robot reading off a cue card." Bill smirked. "That's the nicest insult I've gotten all week." There was something odd in the air now, not friendship, but a strange mutual respect. They were all public figures, all used to applause and attack. But here, no one was performing. It wasn't a panel or a press conference. It was dinner, and somewhere between the scallops and the sharp words, the walls began to drop. Kid Rock leaned forward. "You know what blows my mind? The way people act like we can't even talk anymore. Disagree with someone and bam, you're either a Nazi or a snowflake." Bill nodded slowly. "I've been canceled more times than your last 5 tour stops." The table chuckled. Even Trump smiled. Dana finally spoke, his voice low and grounded. "Everyone's looking to be offended. I run fights for a living. You'd think people would want peace outside the cage. Nope. They bring the cage with them." That hit like a jab to the ribs. For a moment, no one spoke. They just chewed, thought, sat in the silence. Even Trump seemed quieter now, eyes on his plate. Then he looked up. "You know what I miss? When guys could argue politics and still grab a drink after. My father used to yell at his neighbor every Sunday, but by afternoon, they were watching football together." Bill nodded. Back then, people didn't confuse disagreement with betrayal. Trump tapped the table. "Exactly. The moment was surreal. A liberal comic, a former president, a loudmouth rocker, and a UFC mogul all agreeing, not on policy, but on something deeper. A memory, a value, a way of being that felt dangerously close to extinct. And just like that, something unspoken began to take root. Dinner plates were being cleared when Trump pushed back his chair and stood. "Come on," he said, nodding toward the hallway. "I want to show you something." There was no explanation, no dramatic build-up. Just that same showman's grin, softened now by something more personal. The others exchanged quick glances, then followed. Down the hallway they went, Bill, Dana, and Kid Rock, led by Trump's deliberate stride. No press, no staffers, but one silent aide trailing behind. The only sound was the soft echo of polished shoes and the occasional rustle of old portraits watching from the walls. They reached a pair of heavy white doors guarded by 2 Secret Service agents. Trump paused, nodded at them, and opened the doors himself. "The Lincoln bedroom," he said. The room was dim. A tall lamp in the corner cast a warm halo, catching the edges of a grand 4-poster bed. On the far wall, behind a red velvet rope, hung the Gettysburg Address, handwritten, framed, sacred. A mahogany desk stood in the center, stoic and timeless. Bill stepped forward, slow, respectful. "So this is where Lincoln slept, huh?" Trump stood near the doorway, hands in his pockets. "I bring people here when I think they need to remember something." Bill turned to him. "And what's that?" "That even the greatest presidents were hated while they were alive." There was no smirk this time, no camera-ready jab, just a sentence that hung in the air like incense. Dana crossed his arms, glancing at the wall. Kid Rock lingered behind, oddly quiet. "Lincoln was called a tyrant. A clown," Bill said. "He tore the country apart to save it." Trump nodded. "Sound familiar?" Bill didn't respond, but he looked at the desk, then at the framed words behind glass. The weight of history was suddenly palpable, like the room itself was holding its breath. Then Bill broke the silence. "You thinking of running for a 3rd term?" The air changed instantly. Dana blinked. Kid Rock shifted his stance. Trump didn't flinch. He stepped forward, slow and deliberate, until he was eye to eye with Maher. "I'm thinking a lot of things," he said. "We'll see how strong the country is by the time we get to that bridge." "That's not a no," Bill replied. Trump leaned against the bedpost, lowering his voice. "They said I couldn't win. Then I did. They said I couldn't win again. I will. After that, who knows?" Kid Rock finally spoke. "If the rules get changed, someone's going to change them. That's how it works." Bill shook his head. "Democracy only works if people respect the rules, even when they lose." Trump met his eyes. "And what if the game's rigged?" Bill didn't look away. "No system's perfect, but undermining it just because you don't like the outcome? That's how democracies die." The room was still. Not angry, not explosive, just heavy, with questions too big for any dinner. The air in the Lincoln bedroom was thick, not with tension, but something heavier. Legacy, doubt, the kind of silence that only happens when men who've lived loud lives are suddenly faced with history that doesn't care how famous they are. Dana shifted slightly, arms crossed tighter than before. Kid Rock stared at the framed Gettysburg Address like it might speak if he stared long enough. Trump remained by the bedpost, but his gaze was fixed on Bill. "What's your issue with me?" he asked, quieter now. "Not the showbiz stuff. The real deal. Off the record." Bill wasn't surprised. The question had been stalking the edges of their conversation all night. He leaned back, not confrontational, just honest. "You bulldoze the truth," Bill said. "You say things that you know aren't always real, but your people believe them. That's dangerous." Trump didn't flinch. In fact, he looked almost reflective. "And the media doesn't do the same to me?" he asked. Before Bill could answer, Kid Rock jumped in. "Look, I ain't here to referee, but let's not pretend the mainstream ain't selling their own stories too." Dana nodded. "It's not just media. It's everything now. Schools, sports, companies. Everyone's scared to say the wrong thing. No one's allowed to screw up anymore." "Exactly," Trump said, pointing with his fork. "Say the wrong thing once, and you're done. That's what they call being woke, right? It's not justice, it's punishment." Bill sat up straighter. "No, being woke, when it's done right, is about awareness. About recognizing patterns of injustice and inequality. But what you're describing, that's performance art. That's fear dressed up as virtue. Kid Rock laughed. You just called your own people fake. I called everyone fake, Bill replied. Left, right, middle, it doesn't matter. We're all playing roles now. Half the time, I don't even know who's being real anymore. That line landed hard. For the first time, no one had a quick comeback. No joke, no soundbite, just that heavy truth lingering like smoke over the table. Trump pushed his plate forward. So what do we do about it? Bill shrugged. Start by admitting we're all full of crap sometimes. Then maybe we listen a little more than we tweet. Donna chuckled. That's rich, coming from a guy with one of the most sarcastic shows on TV. Bill smirked. Sarcasm's a coping mechanism. Try sitting through 3 years of cable news without it. Kid Rock laughed again, low and slow. Fair. Trump leaned in, eyes narrowing slightly. You ever think I'm right about anything? And there it was, the question that wasn't for TV or ratings, but for something deeper. A man, flawed and famous, asking if he was seen for more than just the noise. Bill didn't answer right away. Then he looked Trump in the eye. Yeah, he said. On immigration. You were right, that people want borders. But you pushed it too far. They want structure, not cruelty. Trump gave a slow nod. No bidding, no slogan, just silence. Mutual recognition. Dana stood first, stretching his arms as if shedding the weight of the room. I need air, he muttered, heading toward the hallway. Trump pushed back his chair too. Come on, he said. I want to show you something else. No one argued. Maybe they needed a breather, not from each other, but from the truth they just shared. They walked down a quieter corridor now, away from the ornate dining room and polished floors, toward a balcony overlooking the south lawn. The doors opened with a soft creak, and cool night air washed over them. Trump stepped to the railing, his silhouette framed by the city's faint glow. You ever stand here at night and just look out? He asked, not looking at anyone in particular. Bill stepped forward slowly, standing beside him. The others followed. The White House grounds stretched out below, perfect hedges, whispering trees. Beyond that, the Capitol, still lit, still restless. It doesn't feel real at first, Trump said. It hits you in waves. What this place is, what it does to people. Bill glanced sideways. So why'd you invite me tonight? Really? Trump didn't answer right away. Then, because I don't want to only talk to people who clap. Bill raised an eyebrow. You could have fooled me the last 6 years. Trump gave a faint smile. Everyone plays a role. Behind them, Kid Rock wandered up beside the railing, arms resting on the stone. Told you, man, he said to Bill. You get in a room with someone, look him in the eye. It ain't the same as trash-talking behind a mic. Bill nodded. You think this changes anything? Kid Rock shrugged. Doesn't have to, but it proves something. People can argue without burning each other down. That counts. Dana joined them, leaning on the far end of the rail. The public wants blood. Online, on stage, on every channel. But maybe they're starting to burn out on all the noise. Trump spoke again, softer this time. They are. Even my base. They're loyal, but tired. Everyone is. It's like the whole country's holding its breath and doesn't know when to exhale. The group stood in silence for a while, not awkward, contemplative. Somewhere in the distance, a helicopter's low thump echoed across the trees. The breeze rustled, carrying with it a momentary calm none of them expected. So now what? Bill asked. We post a selfie and call it unity. Trump shook his head. No cameras. No statements. No fake smiles. Just this 4 guys, 1 table, a bunch of bad history, and a weird moment of honesty. They all nodded. No victory. No conversion. Just a breath, a pause in the screaming. And for the first time in a long while, it felt like enough. The air shifted again as they left the balcony. Not heavier, just quieter. Whatever unspoken understanding had passed between them out there, it lingered in the halls as they walked back through the East Wing. This time, their footsteps were slower, their conversation sparse. No one was performing now. The dinner was over. But something about the night had rearranged the atmosphere. Not with fireworks or revelations, but with the subtle gravity of 4 very different men brushing up against something honest. Trump stopped near a window overlooking the south lawn again. He didn't say much, just stared. I don't hate you, Bill. he said finally, without turning. You know that, right? Bill blinked. The words caught him off guard. Not because he doubted them, but because they weren't meant for show. You're hard to hate, he said, when you say things like that. Then you tweet, and it all unravels. Kid Rock let out a dry laugh. Dana, a few steps behind, didn't say a word, still clearly chewing on Trump's earlier maybe about a third term. Trump turned toward them again, gesturing lightly at the window. You stand here long enough at night, and the city stops feeling like a capital. Starts feeling like something you're responsible for. Bill stepped up beside him. So you invited me to dinner because you wanted, what? Redemption. Trump shook his head. Not redemption. Just one night without the noise. They stood there a moment longer. No one reached for a phone. No one took a selfie. No applause. Just late-night stillness and the scent of history hanging in the air. Kid Rock stretched and let out a breath. All right, I'm tapping out. That duck put me in a coma. Trump smiled faintly. Thanks for coming, Bob. Kid Rock walked off, hands in his pockets, humming something low and bluesy. Dana nodded to the others before disappearing down the hall. Bill lingered. Trump didn't say anything else, just stared out the window like he was watching something in the trees no one else could see. Bill finally spoke. I'll give you this. You know how to keep people guessing. Trump smirked. That's half the job. They shook hands. No drama. No fanfare. Just two men who had said too much to say nothing at all. Bill turned and walked down the hall, the sound of his shoes echoing softly behind him. Outside, the car was waiting. Warm interior. No music. Just the hum of the engine and the blur of Washington's streets slipping by. Bill stared out the window, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The jokes, the jabs, the Lincoln bedroom, the almost answer about a third term, and how human it all felt. He pulled out his phone, not to scroll, but to write. The scariest thing tonight wasn't the answers, he typed. It was how easily the conversation happened. And then he put the phone down. He didn't want commentary. He just wanted silence for a little longer. Sunlight poured through the slats of the hotel window, slicing across Bill Maher's half-drunk cup of coffee and an untouched croissant. He sat at the desk, still in last night's shirt, tie loosened, hair slightly matted from a restless sleep. The legal pad in front of him was blank, just the title scribbled at the top. Dinner with the enemy? He tapped the pen against the paper like it owed him answers. The night before felt like a dream, or maybe something stranger, real but out of place in today's world. For men from wildly different corners of American culture, sitting down, not to destroy each other, but to talk. Not to agree, just to listen. And now, as the city roared back to life outside, Bill sat alone with a question that felt heavier than it had in years. How do you tell the truth when no one wants to hear it? He picked up the pen, tried to write, scratched out a line. Tried again. It's easier to yell at someone you've never met, he wrote. It's harder to hate someone who just poured you a glass of wine. He sat back, staring at the words. That was it, wasn't it? That was what stuck. Not the immigration debate. Not Trump's dodgy answer about a third term. Not even the Gettysburg Address hanging behind velvet ropes. It was the humanity. They didn't exchange numbers. They didn't hug. Hell, they didn't even smile that much. But they talked. And somehow, nobody left angry. That alone felt radical. He thought about his audience. The ones who cheered when he skewered conservatives. The ones who booed every time he dared to humanize the other side. Would they understand? Would they turn on him? He could already hear the headlines. Maher softens on Trump. Secret conservative exposed. Or worse, reasonable. But the real fear wasn't being called a sellout. It was being misunderstood. Because he hadn't changed sides. He hadn't been converted. But for one strange night, he'd seen behind the curtain. Past the slogans. Past the outrage. Past the noise. And he couldn't unsee it. He thought about Trump, standing in the Lincoln bedroom, staring at Lincoln's desk not like a tourist, but like a man trying to measure his own chaos against history's silence. He thought about Dana, the fighter who hated the way America had turned into one long, endless cage match. And Kid Rock, oddly insightful in his own whiskey-soaked way, reminding everyone that you can't cancel a conversation that never starts. Bill closed the notebook. He wasn't going to make a viral monologue out of this. He wasn't going to post a selfie or milk it for headlines. Some moments aren't made for the internet. Some are meant to live in the quiet, inside the people who were there. And this one, this strange, impossible dinner, had changed nothing on the outside, but had cracked something open inside. Bill Maher stood by the window of his hotel room, coffee in hand, watching the city wake up. Cars crawled past red lights, joggers bob along sidewalks, and Washington, D.C. resumed its usual rhythm, loud, divided, relentless. But inside, things were quieter. He wasn't naive. One dinner didn't fix anything. No policies changed. No ideologies softened. No audience switched sides. But something had happened. For men sat at a table, with baggage, history, fire in their chests, and chose not to shout. They chose to listen, chose discomfort over combat. That choice felt revolutionary. Bill picked up his phone, not to tweet, not to post, but to write one last line before it slipped away. You don't have to agree with someone to understand them, but you do have to sit down and listen. He read it once, then again, and let it be. The truth was, he still didn't like Trump. He didn't trust him. But for a few hours, Trump had been just a man, complex, maddening human. And Bill? He hadn't been a pundit or a provocateur. He'd just been a guy with a fork, a drink, and an open ear. And maybe, just maybe, that's where healing starts. Not on stage, not online, but at the table. He grabbed his coat and headed out the door, leaving the night behind, but taking something with him. Something not quite hope, but close. A reminder that even in a world full of noise, the quiet truth still exists. And it always starts with a conversation.